Well, Mary, it's lovely to be here this afternoon to chat to you. I'm just wondering whether you're a Rimington girl. Where were you born?
Well, I was born in the town of Haywood, just quite near to Bury.
All right, so away.
Pardon?
Away from Rimington.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes. But my father had friends in Rimington, and that is how we came to be here.
Oh, so how old were you when you came?
I was 5 years old, and just before we came here, I'd started school in Haywood and run away twice.
Run away twice?
Run away twice,
Why,
yes.
why did you tell us about that?
Yes, and I was quite angry because the teacher then put 2 little boys on guard at the schoolroom door so that I didn't run away again.
What? Why did you run away? Were you frightened? Or?
No, I just didn't want to be inside because I was an outdoor girl, and I had an old friend who had a very interesting allotment quite near to where I lived, which included a big greenhouse with a lovely vine, and I preferred to be outside, so I didn't want to be in school.
Lovely. Oh, right, so you came here when you were 5.
5 years old.
Can you remember anything
yes.
about being that age? Anything at all that you remember from that early on?
I remember quite well coming, because strangely enough, the old school, which was in Stopper Lane, had closed, I understand, at the end of the summer term, where I'd started school in Haywood at the end of that term, and so I had to go to Gisborne School, which as we came to Rimington in August, I started school at Gisborne and enjoyed school and didn't run away again.
Oh, so the school must have made a difference to you then.
The teacher made a difference.
The teacher made a difference.
Yeah,
and did you meet any friends there? Who were your friends at that time?
Oh, my great friend was Mary Carr, who lived next door to me in Stopper Lane. She lived next door with her two sisters, and Mr. and Mrs. Carr, and Mr. Carr had the garage in Stopper Lane.
Oh, lovely. So you spent a lot of time together?
Oh yes, we were great friends, and she only died about 2 years ago. I just forget how old she was, but I was just 6 months older than she was. Yeah.
So looking back, you would remember some of the things that you did together, that you maybe playing together?
Oh yes. We had great fun around Stopper Lane because there was a wind sawmill and a wood yard and the village hall and 1 or 2 sheds belonging to the joinery works, and we were able to play quite freely because the 2 joiners trusted us not to do any damage.
Oh, you were good girls then. You were good girls, but you had a lot of fun, I expect.
Oh yes, yes, we did.
Because they're quite different now. I don't think some of those buildings exist, do they, that you played in?
Well, there were about 3 buildings. One held the joiner's motor vehicle. One held a lot of very fine wood and was a wonderful shed for hide and seek. And it was quite a large wood yard. which provided us with a very good playground. We could take our toys and whatever we wanted, and what with the schoolyard, which was adjacent to the woodyard, we had a great time.
Oh, lovely. And I notice now you've got an awful lot of model animals, well, almost nearly full-size animals in your garden. I suspect that you had something that you did when you were young reminded me about those. Playing with animals, was it?
Oh yes, my father had 10.5 acres of land.
Oh, as much as that?
Yes. Right down to the river. And so, because he was a butcher, but it was only a small business, practically every year I had a pet lamb, because my father would buy 1 or 2 sheep for slaughter and then find that 1 or 2 of them might be in lamb.
Oh, right, yeah.
So they were spared the slaughterhouse, and I had a pet lamb when the time came for it to be born. And so it was always a case of where Mary went, the little lamb went.
So he would have kept the stock on the fields, presumably.
Yes.
So was there a slaughterhouse here?
There was a slaughterhouse here, and there was no official shop as such, but there was it was actually a tin shed which was used for cutting up the meat, and it also held a very large walk-in fridge. But there was no dwelling house here. There was only the ruin of the thatched farmhouse.
Right, I hadn't understood that.
Yes.
So the slaughtering went on here, but you lived somewhere else.
We lived, to start with, in what was termed one of the weavers' cottages in Stopper Lane, right across from this woodyard that I've been talking about. So that was why it was such a handy playground for Mary and myself, because I don't think just at that time there were any other children in Stopper Lane that I can recall now. So, yeah.
Just Mary and you, just your.
Yes.
Your
So
friend.
the two Marys who
Yes.
were next door neighbours spent a lot of time together.
So were there things to do in the village for a young child? Were there any things that you could take up as hobbies or anything? No? What did you do with your time? Would there been brownies or anything like that, or was that?
No, there was
nothing.
There were no uniformed groups at all. It was much later on in my life that I started a brownie group.
Oh, I can remember that. Yeah.
And then I took on guides. When the brownies came to the age that they wanted to join guides, I trained for guides and started a guiding
yes.
group.
I think I knew a little about
But
that.
when we were young, because I lived in Stopper Lane for about three years, and so Mary and I were very close friends, and we used the old schoolyard so much. We drew hops.
Hopscotch!
We played hopscotch quite a lot, and we skipped quite a lot, and we had ball games there because I know there wasn't much traffic about on the road, but the schoolyard had a much smoother playground than the road, and so with no problems of where to play.
They were quite simple games, weren't they then? You know, skipping and hopscotch, things like that.
Yes,
Nothing complicated.
Yeah.
But
And I spent a little while later when I moved to Newby, because I think we were in Stopper Lane for about 3 years or so, and then my father was able to rent a house at Newby called Oak Dean, which was built on the site of the old Newby Mill. And when I moved down there, of course I didn't see Mary just as much because she's lived in Stopper Lane, but I spent an awful lot of time in the fields. My father and mother would be busy slaughtering at the old farmhouse, and I spent a lot of hour after hour in the stream catching tiddlers and bullheads, and then spending hours catching them, putting them in a jar which stood in the stream, and then letting them loose later on in the day.
I wonder if you find tiddlers there now.
When I decided to go home for some food.
So were you expected to help at all in the business or the home as a young person?
No, I don't recall ever being involved much in the house, because I always had either some young rabbits, or at one time I had a Belgian hare.
Oh.
I had some bantams. We had ducks and ducklings, of course. We had 1 or 2 geese. We had a horse which was used for delivering the meat with a horse and cart, because people didn't come to buy the meat. It was always delivered to them.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yes, yes. And we delivered to Gisborne and Rimington. And so on the field itself, I always had some animal to play with. We had always a little sheepdog and innumerable cats, but my dad would never put down any cats, because he said, as long as we have cats wandering around, we won't be having rats.
Some truth in that, as well as Trev and I have found.
The unfortunate thing was that at that time some people put down snares to catch rabbits, and 1 or 2 of our cats unfortunately had to be put to sleep because they got caught in the rabbit snares.
Oh, that's
But so it was. My father said it doesn't matter how many cats we have around here, with plenty of offal from the slaughterhouse. There's plenty of food for them, you know, if they can't catch any food. So I always had all these animals around me, and when my cousin and his wife in my later life had some grandchildren, I had my own farm in the garden.
Yeah, well, so
and the children.
Now you have the pottery animals, yeah, your pottery farm.
Unfortunately, they're a bit brittle, and some of them are broken, you know. But they serve the purpose, because the little children have loved them and ridden on them and moved them about and carried them about.
And they remind you of the days when you played farms on the coffin lids. I remember you told me a little bit about that.
Oh yes, yes, yes. The woodyard had some. When I look back and think about all how shall I put it? The lengths of wood that we used to play on were slices from gigantic oak trees.
Were they?
Because most of the coffins in those days, of course, were made from oak.
Really?
Yes, yes.
Very expensive.
Oh yes, yes. And I had, once again, most of my toys had animals amongst them, because I had a farmyard. I had a hunting set, little lead animals.
Oh yes, yeah.
And
not allowed now. Not allowed now, I suppose.
No.
Lead.
And so I would take those all across to the woodyard with me, and Mary and I would set up a farm completely on top of these big planks of wood, because it formed like a huge table for us to play on.
Yeah.
And we made fields we collected as much moss as we possibly could, from the walls, etc. around, and made our own fields. And of course there were bits of wood and shavings and all sorts of things for us to make a real farmyard.
That's lovely.
So we were never we were never unhappy. We were always, if it was good weather, we were outside, and that was so much part of our life.
Very much, yeah.
And the institute being just across the road from us, Mary's mother at one period looked after the village hall, and which we call the institute. And she, when she was in cleaning, if it was a wet day, we crept inside when she was cleaning out the big metal stove, which was coke fired, and we sometimes drew a hopscotch on
the institute
on the floor of the institute.
But you were trusted and you were loved little girls, yeah. So that's all right.
So we never seemed to be short of anything to do, although we were out in the country.